The sun was hitting the Higgins family's lake house perfectly, and for a moment, I actually believed my fairy tale was starting. Ethan was holding my hand, promising me forever. Then, the door slammed. His mother, Eleanor, didn't bring a blessing. She brought a legal war. She shoved a prenup onto the table. "Sign it, you gold digger," she sneered. "Our empire isn't your lottery ticket." Ethan just looked at the floor. I didn't cry. I signed it in 5 seconds and whispered, "I will sign, Eleanor, but remember, this protects both sides more than you know. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your mental health? What time is it where you are right now? Tell me your story in the comments." I read every single one. The Higgins estate was not a home. It was a museum of ego. It was a sprawling $18 million mansion in a gated community, the kind of place where the grass is cut 3 times a week and the neighbors only speak to you if they are checking your compliance. I remember moving in and realizing very quickly that my presence there was not a celebration. It was a concession. Eleanor lived for the labels. Her garage was a gallery of entitled drive symbols, headlined by a black Range Rover and a Porsche Cayenne for when she felt sporty. She never left her bedroom without being armored in Burberry and Chanel, her wrists heavy with a Cartier love bracelet and a Rolex that probably could have paid off my student loans in a single afternoon. But in that house, I was the only thing that did not have a designer tag, and Eleanor never let me forget it. To the rest of the world, I was the lucky girl who married into the Higgins empire. Behind those marble countertops, I was just free help. I was the one organizing the wine cellar, coordinating with the Michelin star caterers for their endless parties, and making sure the infinity pool was pristine for guests I was not even allowed to talk to. "Sarah dear," Eleanor would say, her Jimmy Choo heels clicking sharply against the floor like a countdown clock, "do try to look less provincial. Your lowly background is starting to show, and it is such a burden for Ethan to have to explain you to our friends at the country club." And Ethan? He was the golden child, the boy who was given every Ivy League advantage, but lacked the spine to use any of them. He would sit there, eyes glued to his Tesla screen, while his mother picked apart my soul piece by piece. He did not defend me. He did not even look at me. In that $18 million cage, the silence was the loudest thing of all. I was an outsider in my own marriage, a singleton standing in the middle of a family photo that was never meant to include me. 5 years. That is how long I played the role of the quiet, dutiful wife in the shadows of the Higgins empire. While Eleanor was busy flaunting her latest Birkin bag at the country club, I was silently building a world they could not even imagine. They chose to see a lowly outsider, conveniently forgetting I was a senior analyst at a top-tier hedge fund before Ethan's empty promises lured me into this gilded cage. Every morning, I watched Ethan leave in his Tesla Model X, looking like the golden child CEO the world expected him to be. But I knew the truth. Higgins Global was a sinking ship, hemorrhaging cash due to his reckless investments and Eleanor's obsession with maintaining a suburban flex lifestyle. I would spend my days being the saintly daughter-in-law, organizing Eleanor's charity brunches, while my secondary monitor was filled with venture capital trades and asset acquisitions. I was managing millions from a high-performance stealth workstation hidden behind the vintage wine crates, a digital war room tucked inside a pantry she never bothered to enter. Eleanor loved to use me as a punching bag during her Napa Valley wine afternoons. She would swirl her glass and sneer. "My friend Margaret's daughter-in-law just funded a new wing at the hospital. And you? You are still just managing our lowly household." Such a disappointment. I never argued. I just let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. You might wonder why I stayed for 5 years and why I kept fulfilling my duties while they treated me like a nuisance. The truth is, when you grow up being told you are a burden, you start to believe that paying for affection is the only way to be loved. It was not patience. It was a prison without bars. I did not stay because I was weak. I stayed because I was numb to the cruelty, waiting for the perfect moment to prove the door had been unlocked all along. I was the invisible observer, and in my silence, I became the only person in that $18 million mansion who actually knew the value of a dollar. By the end of year 5, I was not just Sarah the gold digger. I was the secret majority shareholder of the very debt that was about to crush them. The air in the $18 million McMansion changed overnight. The scent of expensive lilies and floor wax was replaced by the metallic tang of desperation. Higgins Global was finally drowning. Ethan did not come home until 2 o'clock in the morning, his face ghostly white, his hands trembling as he poured himself a drink that cost more than my first car. The liquidity crisis was $5 million. It was a drop in the bucket for the empire they claimed to have, but a fatal wound for the reality they actually lived. I was in the kitchen, quietly sipping tea, when Eleanor stormed in. She did not look like a saint anymore. She looked like a cornered animal. She slammed a piece of paper on the marble countertop, my private bank statement for an account I had kept hidden for years. It showed a balance of $2,500,000. Explain this, she barked, her voice vibrating with a dangerous mix of greed and relief. I did not move. I did not justify, argue, or defend my right to my own money. It is my savings, Eleanor. Your savings? She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. You live in our house. You eat our food. You are part of this family, and this family needs $5 million to survive. This is not your money, Sarah. It is an insurance policy for the Higgins legacy. It is your duty to hand it over. She did not wait for my answer. To her, my sacrifice was not a gift, it was a utility bill. But then came the twist she did not count on. The next afternoon, I received a notification on my phone. An unauthorized attempt to wire $2,500,000 had been blocked. Eleanor hadn't just demanded the money, she had tried to steal it. She used her family name to pressure a bank manager we'd known for years, attempting to bypass protocols by claiming I was mentally unstable and that she had power of attorney. She had not accounted for the fact that my account was not just a number, it was a fortress. 3-layer biometric security, real-time alerts. I watched through the security app as she sat in the study, her face turning from arrogant to ghostly white as the transaction denied screen flashed on her laptop. Eleanor didn't realize that an attempted wire of that size automatically flags federal authorities. I wasn't just blocking her access, I was handing her a criminal fraud investigation on a silver platter. She thought she was punishing me, but she was actually setting me free. She did not know the sound of her fake reality shattering into a million pieces had already begun. The restaurant was a Michelin star sanctuary of marble and hushed whispers, the kind of place where the wine list costs more than a decent car. It was the Higgins' 30th anniversary, and Eleanor had spared no expense to project an image of untouchable success. She had charged this entire anniversary to Ethan's last remaining platinum credit line, a final, desperate attempt to smell like money when they were breathing in debt. She sat at the head of the long, white-clothed table, surrounded by 100 guests from the country club and the homeowners association, bored the very people whose validation she craved like oxygen. Ethan sat next to her, looking like a ghost in a designer suit. I sat at the far end, the burden they had to invite, but clearly did not want. Eleanor did not wait for the main course to start the execution. She tapped her crystal glass with a silver spoon, the sound cutting through the room like a blade. I want to thank everyone for being here, she began, her voice dripping with practiced warmth. But as many of you know, Higgins Global is facing a temporary challenge. A challenge that could be solved in an instant if every member of this family understood the meaning of loyalty. She turned her gaze toward me. The warmth vanished. Sarah, she said, her voice loud enough to reach the back of the room. I have spent 5 years treating you like a daughter. I have given you a seat at our table. And yet, when the family business, the legacy that funds the very roof over your head, needs support, you choose to hide your money in secret accounts. You are effectively stealing from the people who took you in. An audible gasp rippled through the guests. I felt 100 pairs of eyes drilling into me, filled with the judgment Eleanor had carefully cultivated. In that moment, I looked at her and finally understood the trap of normalized cruelty. I used to wait for a thank you, just one, for all the times I had fixed their messes. But then I realized something terrifying. To them, my sacrifice was not a gift, it was a utility bill. They expected it. Eleanor had normalized my pain so completely that asking me to hand over my life's work was not cruelty in her eyes. It was just logistics. In her world, I only existed to fuel her engine. The room froze as I slowly pushed back my chair. I did not scream, I did not defend myself. I just stood up, smoothed out my dress, and met her eyes with a calm, surgical smile. You want to talk about loyalty, Eleanor? I asked, my voice steady and cold. Fine. Let us talk about the reality of your empire. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single, heavy envelope. The silence that followed was heavy, clinical, and absolute. I watched the flickering candlelight reflect in the wine glasses of 100 people who had just heard me called a thief. I did not scream. I did not even raise my voice. I simply placed the heavy envelope on the white linen cloth and slid it toward Eleanor. You called me a gold digger, Eleanor, I said, my voice cutting through the stillness like a surgical blade. You told everyone I was a burden, a lowly outsider who was lucky to be. Eleanor's hand reached for the envelope, her manicured fingers trembling slightly. Sarah, sit down. You are making a scene, she hissed, though her eyes were darting toward the guests. I am not making a scene, I am presenting a bill, I replied. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. 5 years ago, you forced me to sign this prenup to protect your empire. You were so obsessed with the idea that I wanted your money that you did not notice what the contract actually said. I leaned in, my shadow falling over her. The clause you insisted on, the one that excluded me from ever touching Higgins' assets, also legally protected every cent I made from being used to pay your debts. You wanted to make sure I got nothing. Instead, you ensured that when your company collapsed, you could not touch a dime of my success. Eleanor pulled the papers out. Her eyes scanned the text, and I watched the color drain from her face until she went ghostly white. But that is not the best part, I continued, turning to Ethan. He was staring at his plate, and his hands would not stop shaking. You both stopped paying the $120,000 monthly mortgage on your $18 million McMansion 3 months ago. A collective gasp filled the room. The elite crowd of the country club leaned in, their faces masks of shock. You thought the bank was being lenient because of your name, I said, my voice dripping with quiet disdain. The bank was not being lenient. They were being paid by me. I did not just save the house, Eleanor. I bought the deed from the holding company. I bought the debt you could not handle. The room froze. I could see the sweat on Ethan's forehead. Eleanor tried to speak, but she was stuttering, her fake reality shattering into a million pieces. For 5 years, you treated me like free help, I said, looking her dead in the eye. You thought I was fueling your engine, but the truth is I was buying the track. I am not a gold digger, Eleanor. I am your landlord. And as of this moment, your empire is nothing more than a costume you have been renting with my money. The rent is officially due. I stood tall, the calmest person in the Michelin star restaurant, while the woman who had tried to destroy me began to hyperventilate in front of the very people she had tried to impress. I did not look back when I left that restaurant. I did not need to. The silence in that room was the loudest applause I have ever received. The next morning, I served the divorce papers and the eviction notice simultaneously. I had already legally terminated the lease for the staff and cut off the utility accounts they couldn't afford anyway. The house was mine, and I was making it very cold, very quiet, and very empty for them. Eleanor tried to scream to call the lawyer she could no longer afford, but the empire was already gone. With the sheriff standing by to enforce the court order, her protests were nothing more than noise against the cold, hard reality of the law. I watched from my car as she was forced to pack her Burberry coats and Chanel bags into cardboard boxes, leaving the $18 million mansion that was never really hers. Today, I live in a luxury penthouse overlooking the city. There are no Range Rovers or fake status symbols to maintain. Just peace. Looking back, I realized there is a profound difference between having and being. The Higgins family had the mansion and the luxury cars, but they were nothing without my funding. Their power was just a costume they rented with my money. Once I stopped paying the rent, the costume vanished, and everyone finally saw them for what they truly were, empty. Justice is not always about making the other person suffer. It is about building a life so full of success and joy that their toxicity can no longer reach you. I did not just win a war. I built a new kingdom where they are not even allowed to enter. If you are listening to this story and feeling a familiar knot in your chest, if you have ever been the one standing in the back of the family photo, or the one paying the bills but never getting the invite, I want you to know this. You are not crazy. You are not selfish for wanting to be treated like a human being. And most importantly, You are not alone. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that the door is already unlocked. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice. Until next time.